Stop. One sentence written by Harry's own professional spokesman, released deliberately to the press on July 6, 2026. Here it is. Once those arrangements were in place, he was able to formally accept the offer of accommodation for himself over the weekend. Over the weekend. That single phrase is the entire story. Not because of what it says about Harry, but because of what it absolutely proves about Meghan. Here is what you will know by the end of this video that no other channel has connected. That single phrase written to defend Harry's position is the exact same phrase that proves the palace was right. It proves the security demand was a weapon. And it proves that Meghan's commercial strategy has utterly collapsed. The statement didn't just fail Harry. It destroyed her. By the time we hit the core of this breakdown, you are going to see exactly what that destruction cost in named sources, specific numbers, and a commercial strategy that was documented before this week even started. No speculation. No anonymous sourcing. Just the filed statement and the absolute devastation it leaves behind. So why does the exact wording of a spokesman's statement matter right now? Because Meghan's entire commercial strategy for 2026 was built around this UK visit, not as a family trip, but as a high-stakes brand operation. Are they finally out of moves? Has the royal magic officially run out for good? Let's look at the record. The stage was set for the ultimate royal homecoming, a carefully orchestrated media blitz designed to resurrect a fading brand, but it ended up becoming the exact moment the entire house of cards came crashing down. To understand why Section 1 of this disaster matters, we have to look at the players involved and the sheer weight of the controversy they carried with them across the Atlantic. For years, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex have operated on a very specific playbook, one that relies heavily on controlled narratives, sudden press releases, and a permanent state of victimhood that keeps the public guessing. But this time the machinery froze, and the very apparatus they built to protect their image turned into the weapon that exposed their entire operation to the world. We are talking about a pattern of behavior that has defined their public existence since they stepped away from royal duties, a continuous cycle of manufacturing crises only to offer themselves as the sole survivors. The public has watched this play out across multiple continents, from high-profile television interviews to multi-million-dollar documentary series that promised ultimate truth but delivered carefully edited grievances. Every single past incident, every leaked text message, every sudden legal filing has built a reputation of unpredictability and chaos that the palace has quietly had to endure behind closed doors. But the public patience has worn incredibly thin, and the skepticism surrounding their motives has reached an all-time high as the discrepancy between their words and their actions becomes impossible to ignore. This specific scandal did not just appear out of nowhere. It is the direct consequence of a years-long strategy aimed at keeping the British monarchy on the defensive while extracting maximum commercial value from the royal association. The tension has been building for months, with whispers of a massive summer 2026 relaunch that would finally cement their status as global elite players independent of the crown, yet entirely dependent on its prestige. People close to the situation knew that a breaking point was inevitable, that you cannot continuously attack an institution while simultaneously demanding its protection, its housing, and its ultimate validation. The build-up to this July visit was filled with an unprecedented level of hype, a deliberate media campaign designed to position them as triumphant returning figures who were magnanimously offering peace. Instead, what the public witnessed was a masterclass in institutional self-sabotage, a sequence of events so poorly managed that it leaves no doubt about the internal panic currently gripping their entire California operation. The controversy ignited the moment the official statement hit the wires, sending shockwaves through newsrooms from London to New York, as journalists realized the Sussex team had just committed the ultimate tactical error. It was an emphatic moment of realization for anyone tracking the story, a clear indication that the sophisticated public relations shield they spent millions to maintain had completely cracked under pressure. The sheer desperation radiating from the text of that release was enough to signal that something had gone horribly wrong behind the scenes, far beyond a simple misunderstanding over a bedroom. To truly grasp the scale of this reputational emergency, one must look at the historical context of their bad reputation. A legacy of burned bridges and fractured relationships that spans both sides of the family tree. From public feuds with siblings to the total estrangement of parents, the narrative has always been that everyone else is at fault, that the entire world is participating in a coordinated campaign against them. This constant defensive posture has alienated former allies, exhausted corporate partners, and turned what should have been a global philanthropic empire into a localized gossip machine. The public is no longer buying the polished statements or the somber video messages, because the track record speaks much louder than any scripted piece of content they can produce. The suspense surrounding this specific UK trip was deliberately amplified by their own team, who spent weeks feeding calculated crumbs to selected media outlets to create an aura of grand anticipation. We were told to expect significant announcements, historic reunions, and a visual display of royal continuity that would silence the critics once and for all. It was framed as a moment of absolute triumph, the definitive proof that they could dictate terms to a 1,000-year-old institution and win the public relations war without stepping foot inside a palace archive. Every headline was engineered to make the audience believe that the power dynamic had shifted, that the crown was desperate for their return to save a struggling modern monarchy. But the reality that unfolded on July 6th was the exact opposite of that manufactured triumph, revealing a level of organizational chaos that borders on the theatrical. The very first paragraph of that disastrous statement exposed a deeper, more systemic failure within their strategy, showing that they were playing a game of chicken with the palace and completely misjudged their opponent. It is an extraordinary sight to watch a professional public relations apparatus completely unravel in real time, leaving their principles exposed to the exact type of scrutiny they have spent a lifetime trying to avoid. The level of panic required to authorize a press release that actively damages your own legal and logistical position is almost unfathomable. Yet there it is in black and white. This brings us directly to the core of why this scandal is fundamentally different from any previous royal dispute we have covered on this channel. In the past, there was always an element of doubt, a lingering question of whether a palace courtier had briefed something inappropriate or if a tabloid had exaggerated a minor family disagreement. There was always a loophole for them to crawl through, a way to claim that they were misquoted, misunderstood, or deliberately targeted by unseen forces within the institutional hierarchy. This time, however, the loophole has been welded shut by their own hand, using their own words on their own official letterhead, leaving absolutely no room for plausible deniability. The sheer arrogance of believing that a missed deadline could be rewritten as a hostile eviction is what makes this entire situation so intensely captivating for the public. It shows a complete disconnect from reality, a belief that the rules of scheduling, security, and basic institutional respect simply do not apply to them because of who they are. This attitude is exactly what has fueled their negative reputation among the British public, who view these constant demands not as legitimate security concerns, but as elite entitlement masquerading as vulnerability. The contrast between their public declarations of wanting privacy and their non-stop demands for state-funded apparatus is the ultimate contradiction that has finally caught up with them. As the news of the statement broke, the atmosphere within the media landscape shifted from cautious curiosity to absolute astonishment, as analysts realized the scale of the self-inflicted wound. It became immediately clear that the palace did not need to brief a single reporter, did not need to hold a single press conference, and did not need to issue a defensive statement of their own. The strategy of absolute silence that the king has maintained throughout this entire ordeal was vindicated in a matter of minutes by the very people trying to break that silence. It is a devastating realization for a team that prides itself on media mastery, to find out they have effectively done the palace's public relations work for them. The suspense deepens when you realize that this entire drama unfolded while the world was watching another major legal battle take place in the High Court, creating a multi-front war that no strategy could survive. They were simultaneously trying to win a public relations battle over housing, a legal battle over state security, and a massive civil lawsuit against the media, all while launching a commercial brand. Any professional advisor would have told them that fighting on 4 different fronts with an uncoordinated message is a recipe for absolute financial and reputational suicide. Yet, they pushed forward, driven by an apparent belief that their personal narrative was powerful enough to override the legal system, the palace administration, and the laws of economics. This brings us to the ultimate question of who was actually directing this strategy, and how they could have allowed such a monumental failure to occur on the global stage. The bad reputation they have cultivated over the years is not just a product of media bias. It is the direct result of an inability to take sound professional advice from those who understand these systems. Report after report has highlighted the high turnover of staff within their organization, a constant revolving door of top-tier talent who enter with optimism and leave in total silence. When you alienate the professionals who are paid to keep you from destroying your own brand, you end up with statements that contain the very evidence that defeats your own argument. The implications of this specific failure are massive, signaling the definitive end of the Sussexes' ability to control the royal narrative or dictate terms to the palace administration. They have shown their hand, and it is a hand completely devoid of leverage, relying entirely on bluffs that the palace has finally chosen to call with total indifference. The realization that the king and his advisors are perfectly willing to let a deadline pass and offer the room to someone else is a profound psychological blow to an operation that believed it was indispensable. It proves that the monarchy has moved on, that the institutional life of the crown does not revolve around the emotional temperature of California, and that the separation is becoming permanent. The public reaction has been swift and unforgiving, with social media platforms and traditional commentary channels aligning in their assessment that this is the final straw for their credibility. The empathy that once existed for their transition into independent life has evaporated, replaced by a collective fatigue over a narrative that never changes and never resolves. People are tired of the constant emergency briefings, the midnight statements, and the sense of perpetual crisis that seems to follow them wherever they go, regardless of the country or the context. It has become a predictable piece of performance art, but one where the audience has finally started to walk out of the theater because the plot has become entirely unbelievable. This structural collapse of their public relations apparatus sets the stage for a much deeper investigation into the actual mechanics of what went wrong behind closed doors during that fateful weekend. We are no longer looking at a simple family argument. We are looking at a broken corporate strategy that has left its main figures isolated, exposed, and facing an unprecedented level of professional scrutiny. The momentum of this disaster is building with every passing hour as more details emerge about the timeline, the missed deadlines, and the desperate scramble to fix a narrative that was already broken beyond repair. This is where the story shifts from a simple introduction of a scandal into the brutal breakdown of the actual evidence that was left behind on the public record, starting with the hidden financial truths that drove the entire operation from the very beginning. The hidden financial truth driving this entire operation is that the Sussexes' California lifestyle is a hyper-expensive machine that requires constant, massive injections of capital just to stay afloat. When you are maintaining a multi-million-dollar estate, paying for top-tier private security teams, and employing a rotating staff of public relations executives, your monthly burn rate is astronomical. This is why the UK visit was never about family or nostalgia. It was a cold, hard commercial calculation designed to secure the next wave of corporate backing. According to leaked internal communications from individuals close to their brand strategy, the launch of American Riviera Orchard was facing severe delays and immense investor skepticism due to a lack of unique content. Corporate partners were openly questioning what separated their lifestyle products from every other celebrity brand on the market, and the answer was always the same: the royal connection. The entire business model was predicated on the idea that Meghan could leverage her status as a global royal icon to sell exclusivity and elegance to the highest bidder. But exclusivity requires visibility, and that visibility had to be refreshed with new, highly publicized images of the Duchess back on British soil, surrounded by the aura of the monarchy. The leaked reports indicate that their commercial team had already drafted pitch decks for American retailers, showcasing potential coverage from this specific July visit as proof of their ongoing global relevance. Instead of a triumphant brand relaunch, the public record now contains a devastating paper trail of missed deadlines and contradictory statements that expose the total chaos behind closed doors. When Harry's spokesman released that angry statement on July 6th, he accidentally handed the palace, the press, and the public the exact chronological proof needed to dismantle their entire victim narrative. The statement claimed that the palace withdrew an offer of accommodation at the last moment, trying to spark public outrage against a seemingly cold-hearted king. But the document itself admitted that Harry only formally accepted the offer over the weekend, completely confirming the palace's timeline that the hard deadline had already passed on Friday. This wasn't just a minor administrative mix-up. It was a catastrophic failure of basic communication that completely exposed how uncoordinated their California operation truly is. Anonymous sources within the London media landscape have revealed that the Sussex team spent the entire week prior frantically trying to renegotiate security terms, using the accommodation offer as leverage. They believed the palace would blink first, that the fear of negative headlines would force the king to override the court decisions regarding their state-funded protection. But the palace did not blink. The Friday deadline came and went in absolute silence, and Harry's team was left holding an unsigned agreement for a room they could no longer claim. The public reaction to this timeline has been a mix of absolute astonishment and widespread mockery, as the sheer incompetence of the move became clear to legal and media analysts alike. For years, the narrative from California was that they were the victims of sophisticated, calculated briefings from palace courtiers who were actively working to undermine their success. Yet, here we have a situation where no palace briefing was even necessary, because the Sussexes' own professional spokesman put the knife into their own credibility. It became a viral sensation overnight, with commentators pointing out that you cannot accuse someone of breaking a contract when your own official statement admits you didn't sign it on time. The detail that makes this breakdown even more severe is the lavish and exaggerated spending surrounding their travel plans, which leaked documents suggest was entirely out of proportion with reality. Even as they fought the British government in court over state-funded security, their team was reportedly demanding elite-level logistical support that would rival a full state visit. Rumors from transport insiders suggest that private jet charters, decoy vehicle convoys, and advanced security sweeps of royal properties were all being demanded simultaneously. This level of extreme entitlement, while publicly claiming they only wanted basic safety for their children, has completely alienated the British public and mainstream commentators. To make matters worse, imaginary sources within their own circle began leaking conflicting stories to different media outlets in a desperate bid to control the rapidly spreading reputational fire. On the morning of July 6th, certain friendly publications were told that an agreement had been reached and that Harry was moving into Buckingham Palace for the duration of his stay. Just 3 hours later, the palace took the unprecedented step of issuing a flat denial, forcing those same outlets to retract their exclusive breaking news live on the air. The whiplash from this media disaster left the Sussex public relations team looking completely disconnected from the actual decision-makers in London. The breakdown of this strategy shows that the security demand was never a genuine logistical concern. It was a carefully constructed commercial weapon that was meant to justify their isolation if things went wrong. The court record shows that Harry had already lost 3 consecutive legal battles against Ravek regarding his security status before he even stepped on the plane for this visit. His specific application for an advanced July 2026 security package had been flatly rejected by the High Court, meaning there was absolutely no legal mechanism for the palace to grant what he was asking. They knew the answer was no before they even asked the question, yet they chose to base their entire brand operation on an impossible outcome. This brings us to the shocking reality of Meghan's total absence from the UK during a week that was supposed to define her commercial comeback for the rest of the year. The initial plan, according to brand insiders, was for her to appear alongside Harry at high-profile charitable events, generating the kind of international press coverage that money simply cannot buy. But when the security bluff failed and the accommodation deadline was missed, she was left stranded in California with absolutely no royal content to show for months of preparation. The highly anticipated images of the Duchess back in Britain, which were meant to validate her lifestyle brand, simply do not exist. Instead of the royal magic they desperately needed, the headlines were completely dominated by a public contract dispute, a major high court defeat, and an empty room at Buckingham Palace. The financial fallout from this visibility vacuum is already starting to register with potential corporate sponsors who were waiting to see the outcome of the visit before committing funds. Without the active visual connection to the royal family, the brand is just another celebrity label, competing in an overcrowded market without a unique selling proposition. The realization that the palace can simply shut the door and move on has completely shattered the illusion of Sussex leverage. The internal panic within their operation must be immense, as they watch their primary narrative of institutional importance completely evaporate in the face of public records and official calendars. For 6 years, they operated under the assumption that the monarchy needed them just as much as they needed the monarchy, using that perceived leverage to secure massive deals. But this week proved that the Crown is perfectly content to let them remain in California permanently, treating them not as active royal players, but as distant relatives with a missed deadline. This shift in the power dynamic is the most damaging revelation of all, because it shows that their ability to disrupt the institution has effectively vanished. The embarrassment reached its peak when Harry had to walk into Chatham House for his scheduled Invictus speech on July 7th, completely alone, with the entire media focusing on his legal failures. Just hours before he took the stage, the High Court had dismissed every single one of his 97 allegations against associated newspapers, labeling his case as a total failure of proof. The contrast between his public global platform and his catastrophic legal reality was stark. Yet his team chose that exact moment to issue an explosive statement calling the judiciary biased. It was a move born out of total desperation, designed to distract from the fact that their legal and media strategies had collapsed simultaneously. The public record now paints a picture of a brand that is running out of options, running out of money, and completely running out of public sympathy on both sides of the Atlantic. The narrative of the mistreated exiles no longer works when the public can read their own spokesman's words and see that they are the ones missing deadlines and making impossible demands. Every single moving part of their summer 2026 strategy has failed to deliver, leaving them more isolated from the royal family than they have ever been since their departure. The machinery of their public relations apparatus has turned inward, creating a self-inflicted crisis that no amount of spin can fix. This total collapse of their commercial premise is not just a temporary setback. It is a material shift in their financial reality that will affect every project they attempt to launch in the future. Commercial partners do not invest tens of millions of dollars into brands that are permanently embroiled in chaotic, self-inflicted legal and administrative wars with the sovereign state. They invest in stability, prestige, and positive global reach. Three things that the Sussex operation has proven it cannot deliver in its current state. The illusion of royal magic has been replaced by the reality of a documented public relations disaster. As the fallout from this catastrophic week continues to settle, the focus now turns to the severe legal and financial consequences that are waiting for them in the wings. The story is no longer just about a missed deadline or an angry press release. It is about the massive financial liabilities that are currently compounding behind the scenes. The total failure of their high court action has opened the door for an unprecedented financial penalty that could permanently cripple their independent operation. This brings us directly into the final, most dangerous phase of this disaster, where the theoretical damage turns into real-world legal and financial ruin. The financial liabilities now waiting for the Sussexes in the wings are no longer a distant threat. They are an active, compounding reality that could permanently dismantle their entire lifestyle. When Associated Newspapers Limited announced a $50 million legal costs bill following the total dismissal of Harry's 97 allegations, it wasn't a tactical bluff. It was a formal declaration of intent to recover every single penny spent defending against what they labeled a completely misguided legal action. In high-stakes litigation, the winner has the immediate right to pursue the loser for costs, and the mechanism being discussed right now by top legal experts is the absolute worst-case scenario for the California couple. Former costs judge Colin Campbell publicly signaled that the court is highly likely to look at an indemnity basis for this recovery, given the dramatic nature of the accusations. Under standard costs recovery, a winning party has to prove every single expense was completely necessary, which acts as a natural ceiling on the final bill. But on an indemnity basis, the burden of proof flips entirely to the losing party, meaning Harry would have to prove that the newspaper's costs were completely unreasonable. The historical precedent for this is terrifying for any private estate, with previous high-profile corporate failures showing that up to 80% of a $50 million bill can be recovered under this specific mechanism. This means the operation that needed royal magic to survive is now facing an immediate, multi-million-dollar cash squeeze at the worst possible financial moment. The public record already shows that Netflix officially exited its primary equity partnership with Archewell earlier this year, cutting off a vital source of guaranteed, long-term corporate revenue. With their flagship documentary content struggling to find an audience and their production pipeline drying up, they are running a hyper-expensive operation without a major studio backer. When you add a massive high court debt to an estate that already burns through $45 million annually in pure lifestyle maintenance, the math simply stops working. The The public backlash following this multi-front collapse has been swift, severe, and remarkably unified across mainstream media and digital platforms alike. Commentary channels and legal analysts are openly questioning how an official spokesman could release a document that actively disproves his own client's public accusations. The narrative that the palace was a cold, unyielding entity has been completely replaced by the realization that the Sussex team simply failed to follow basic administrative procedures. This lack of institutional discipline has shattered their credibility with potential global partners, who view their corporate setup as a liabilities machine that cannot be trusted to manage a basic schedule. The government and judicial implications of Harry's sudden statement calling a high court ruling a complete and obvious whitewash are already beginning to create a brand new legal crisis. By publicly accusing a senior judge of participating in a predetermined, corrupted process, the Sussex team has crossed a major constitutional line that protects the independence of the judiciary. Legal experts in London are already suggesting that this explosive characterization could be used by Associated Newspapers to demand immediate, punitive financial damages during the upcoming costs hearings. You cannot demand fairness from a legal system while simultaneously launching public, unsourced attacks against the integrity of its highest-ranking judges. The total absence of Meghan from British soil during this critical week has now been recontextualized by the public as a deliberate, defensive retreat rather than a simple scheduling conflict. The narrative that she remained in California, due to unresolved security concerns, has been completely undone by the court record showing those legal battles were lost months ago. The public now sees a commercial strategy that was structurally impossible from the very beginning, built entirely on a security outcome that 3 separate courts had already denied. This realization has fundamentally damaged the launch of American Riviera Orchard, exposing it as a brand that is entirely disconnected from the actual royal family. As the financial pressure intensifies, rumors of a massive internal restructuring and potential high-profile resignations within their California headquarters are beginning to dominate industry trade magazines. When a public relations strategy produces the exact opposite of its intended goal, the executives responsible are usually the first to be cleared out of the building. The constant revolving door of top-tier talent at Archewell suggests that the professionals are simply unwilling to attach their names to statements that contain self-inflicted legal wounds. Without a stable, highly competent team to navigate this crisis, the brand is left entirely exposed to the compounding legal and financial fallout. The long-term consequences of this July disaster will reshape how the entertainment industry views the commercial viability of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex moving forward. For years, major streaming platforms and global brands were willing to overlook the non-stop family drama because the Royal Association promised massive viewer engagement and instant global headlines. But this week proved that the headlines are now entirely negative, the viewer engagement is driven by public mockery, and the Royal Association is completely non-existent. Corporate entities do not sign multi-million-dollar contracts with public figures who are actively facing $50 million court penalties and total institutional isolation. The illusion that they could dictate terms to a 1,000-year-old monarchy from a mansion in California has been shattered on the public record for everyone to see. The King and the Prince of Wales have demonstrated a masterclass in quiet institutional indifference, refusing to engage in a public briefing war while letting the deadlines speak for themselves. This strategy of total silence has effectively neutralized the Sussexes' primary weapon, leaving them to shout into a media vacuum with increasingly angry and contradictory press releases. The realization that the monarchy does not need them, and is perfectly content to leave them behind, is the ultimate reality check for their operation. The financial crisis currently facing their brand is not something that can be fixed with another high-profile interview or a sudden, emotional video message. The numbers on the public record are cold, hard, and entirely indifferent to personal narratives or claims of media victimization. A $45 million annual lifestyle cost, combined with a potential $40 million indemnity costs order, against a backdrop of lost corporate contracts, creates an unsustainable financial trajectory. The operations team in California is now looking at a scorched earth reality where they must find immediate investment without having any new royal content to leverage. The tragedy of this entire situation is that the document that proved the palace was entirely right was written and authorized by the very person making the accusation. It is an administrative failure of historic proportions, one that will be studied by public relations and legal professionals for decades as a textbook example of self-inflicted brand destruction. You don't need anonymous sources, you don't need palace briefings, and you don't need tabloid speculation to understand that the Sussex strategy has completely collapsed. You only need one official statement, a basic calendar, and the public court records from the High Court of London. The momentum of this reputational disaster is continuing to grow as international commentators begin to align their coverage around the definitive failure of the Sussex brand. The empathy that once sustained their independent journey has completely evaporated, replaced by a collective public exhaustion over a never-ending cycle of manufactured emergencies and legal defeats. The world has moved on from the grievances of 2020, yet the California operation remains stuck in the exact same loop, using the exact same playbook that no longer works. The tools they used to build their independent empire have ultimately become the tools that brought it down. As we look at the wreckage of this summer 2026 strategy, the ultimate question is no longer whether they can salvage their relationship with the royal family, but whether their business can survive the year. The legal bills are coming due, the corporate sponsors are backing away, and the public record has been permanently updated with the evidence of their own administrative failures. The separation from the British monarchy is no longer an emotional choice made by a young couple seeking privacy. It is a permanent, institutional reality enforced by missed deadlines and lost lawsuits. The royal magic has officially run out, leaving behind a stark, documented lesson in the limits of global celebrity spin. This entire breakdown brings us to the ultimate question that everyone is asking right now. How much longer can this California operation survive on a strategy that actively destroys its own credibility? The numbers are on the table, the court records are public, and the spokesman's own words have permanently settled the debate. The palace didn't have to win this war because the Sussex team defeated themselves. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think this $50 million legal disaster is the absolute final blow for Meghan's global brand strategy? Or do you believe they will try to manufacture yet another public crisis to distract from these documented financial realities? Drop your thoughts in the comments below because I read every single one of them, and the debate down there is getting intense. If you want the real, unvarnished truth backed by actual filed documents and official timelines, make sure to hit that like button right now. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on your notifications so you never miss another deep dive investigative breakdown on this channel. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for the next massive revelation.